And we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Professional Novice. My name is Ali Rizvi, and today we're going to get into a topic that's actually kind of personal and very, very close to me. So I'm really looking forward to this. Before we go on, if you're watching this on YouTube, the episodes of this podcast are available on all of your podcast apps, on Spotify, on iTunes, and so on. So you can really listen to it anywhere. We most recently had an episode on physician suicide with my friend, Dr. Anwar Kokar. So make sure you check that out if you're into that topic. But so we'll get into it today. Divorce. So going through a divorce is always difficult. It's always complicated. Doesn't matter what your circumstances are. And when there are children involved, it can be even more fraught. It can be even more heartbreaking. So if you're a divorced father, divorced dad who is fortunate enough to have shared or full custody of your children, you might be surprised at the lack of resources that are available out there to help you navigate your life as a single father. Right? There isn't a whole lot out there. And my guest today is trying to help change that. So I'm here with Elena Locker-Torres. She is a licensed master social worker and family counselor who works with divorced parents, especially fathers, and their children. She's also a clinical forensic specialist who works with children who undergoing the most adverse of circumstances. She is the founder of Together Family Wellness, which is a counseling and support service for parents and families. Having grown up as an only child whose own parents divorced when she was a child, she brings both her professional and her personal insights into this topic. Elena, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you here.
Hi, Ali. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to start with how you got into this. You clearly have, there's a lot of work that you do, there's a lot of hats that you wear. How did you decide to, like I mentioned, that you had a personal experience of getting into this. What made you decide to go into this line of work?
So divorced dads, I think, are a huge population that are really underrepresented, especially in the whole arena of divorce and how it affects people. I myself have parents that are divorced. I'm also an only child. And so I saw a lot of stuff that I wish that my parents could have done differently or better or alternatively. So I come to this situation with a lot of empathy because I've gone through that same situation before. And I think, again, that there are so many dads out there who are hurting and who are struggling with everything that encompasses a divorce. And I really think that dads definitely have a voice and have issues that are really not talked about enough. And so it was a mix of personal and professional interest. I'm a social worker in New York City, and I work with children and families. And I also used to be a teacher. So I really, really like working with families and just coming up with solutions and insights that can hopefully help other people.
And that's great. So we decided to talk. We talked about this earlier, and you sent me a list of 10 essential tips for newly divorced dads, and that's what we're going to get into. So we're going to go into these one by one. We have people watching this. Tariq Al-Had saying this topic is near and dear to me. I grew up as the only child of divorced parents, and I'm also going through a divorce. Right? So this is obviously, it's a very common situation that people go through. So I think that it's really, really good to have you here, and I'm glad that you're here to talk about it.
Thanks for having me, Ali.
Yeah, well, thank you. So we're going to get into it. There's 10 essential tips for newly divorced dads. The very first one, and so I posted about this on my social media, on Facebook and Twitter, about if you're a divorced parent and if you're a divorced father and you're raising children, or if you are the child of divorced parents, what is the advice that you'd give? What's the right thing to do? What's wrong based on people's experience? And a lot of people chimed in. And this was by far the most common thing. So I'm not surprised that you made it number one on your list, right? And the first thing that you've said is never trash your ex in front of your child, no exceptions.
Absolutely. Just know that every punch that you try to throw at your ex lands on your child.
Right. So, yeah, I've always thought that, and I've got this too. I'm a sort of a part-time single father with a 4-year-old daughter, and what I've heard most about this is that when you do that, when you trash your ex in front of your child, you're making them choose between parents, right?
Absolutely. You're putting the child in a position where they feel not only like they have to choose, but like they have to mediate. Um, and children are children because they're meant to be children. They're not meant to be advisors to their parents or peacemakers between their parents. And so I cannot stress enough, never ever trashing your ex in front of your child. Absolutely no exceptions. You may have an extremely hostile divorce. There may be factors that are very disturbing to both sides involved, but speaking illy of a partner in front of your child, it puts the child in almost a situation of captivity. They're a captive audience, first of all, right, on a very basic level, and then they're also sort of forced to listen, and they feel like they have to take a side or that they have to make things better or make peace. And what's really interesting is that I think that there's this misnomer that if the children are really young, 3 or 4 or 5, that they may not notice these things or may not be affected by them. And in fact, I know children as young as 3, 4 years old who have told me things like, mama talks about daddy and uses bad words, or daddy talks about mama and uses bad words. And so your children are sponges. They're sponges, and they will be sponges for positive things and also for negative things.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that is the most important thing. And there are a lot of people who had thoughts on this as well. So hopefully, let's see if anybody has any questions about this, tag professional novice, and then we can address them towards the end. Okay, I'm going to go to the second one now. That's this. So you said, listen to your child's feelings. Try to comfort your child instead of being angry or frustrated with them.
Absolutely. So listening to your child's feelings and comforting them, I think that, when parents get separated or when they get divorced, there are a lot of transitions and there are a lot of actually like logistical things that are changing. And so a child now that's used to being in one home who is now being shuffled between one home and the other, probably having different toothbrushes in different houses, different pajamas, all those things. I think parents or adults are more used to sort of adults are more accustomed to changes and transitions, whereas children thrive on routines. I mean, that's why school is so good for children. A lot of folks who have had their children in remote learning I'm sure can agree with this, that school provides a very steady routine and children thrive on routines. And when you have a new situation where logistically, again, these things are changing, I'm going to go to mom's house for 2 days and I'm going to go to dad's house for the weekend. It can be very jarring for children, and children don't do well with those sort of transitions. And I think that it's easy for adults involved to get frustrated because the children are not acclimating quickly enough. And I don't necessarily think it's an intentional frustration, but I think it's just something super important just to notice and to be aware of, that transitions are not easy.
Yeah, that's especially true right now in the COVID. So I'm in Toronto, and we're still in lockdown. We'll be locked down for a little while longer, and the schools have been closed. So you have a separation happening. You've got the two homes that they're being shuttled between the two homes every few days. And then, you think, okay, there's some continuity here. You've got the school, you've got, a couple of things here and there, daily routines. And we're going to talk about daily routines in a few minutes as well. But with the schools shutting down, them having to go online, then opening up again, then shutting down again. I mean, that's actually been really frustrating, I think, for a lot of kids as well. And it's probably exacerbated the situation. And it's frustrating for parents because the kids are at home and then parents are working from home and they're on Zoom calls and the kids are coming. So it's anybody who's going through this now. And it seems there are a lot more divorces that have happened during the pandemic as well, right?
Absolutely.
So
they say in sickness and in health, and I guess COVID is not enough of a sickness to stick around.
Yeah, it isn't. So that's really important. So in addition to listening to the child's feelings, right? This is for number 3. Oh, I forgot to put the number 3 here, but but you said that parents themselves or the fathers themselves should understand and explore their own feelings. So you can have feelings of guilt, fear, regret, insecurity, uncertainty, doubts about your competence as a parent. And so, yeah, I have to say, I think that this may be something that is particularly different for men, just the way we're raised. I mean, we're not necessarily told to express our feelings or to explore them. I mean, we don't usually do that. We don't sit around and try to explore our feelings and everything. It just feels weird. I mean, you're smiling with me just saying it because you're imagining some guy like sitting down and just exploring his own feelings, because it seems, and it should happen more. I'm not saying it should happen more, but it just doesn't. So that kind of introspection, right, into your own emotions and the things that you feel, and you like nailed it here. You know, there's guilt. I mean, I'm just looking at this, and this actually resonated with me a lot. You know, you have guilt about things, you know, and the guilt is a really hard thing to balance, because you have a child and you want to maintain their routine, but you also know they're going through a lot, and then you feel guilty if you're too tough on them. So you know, you have that feeling of guilt. There's a fear of uncertainty. There's regret. There's insecurity, uncertainty, and then doubts. Like, am I a good dad? Am I a good father? Right. So, what's your experience been like? You know, working with men who are divorced or raising children who are going through this. How do you get them to explore their feelings?
So I think the first thing that I like to tell dads that I work with is that you really have to be kind to yourself and have some self-compassion, which again can be really, really difficult. But what I try to tell dads, first of all, is that number one, you're only human. And number two, you have feelings too. And again, I don't think men are used to that. And that's a very, very fair point. And I think part of what can make this helpful is to sort of be brave to get a little bit vulnerable, and also allow yourself to know that you're not feeling okay. Because I think it's one thing to be conscious of the fact that you're in a bad place, or conscious of the fact that you're feeling guilty, but really actually being able to sit with those feelings and acknowledge them, super, super important. I always like to also tell dads that dads have feelings too. It's not just moms that have feelings. I think we, you know, in popular culture, when a fracture in a family happens, it's really concentrating on the mother and the mother's hardships, which of course I would like to stress that moms go through a whole lot when a divorce happens. And I think that dads are sort of left on the sidelines because usually fathers are not viewed as the primary caregivers. They're usually viewed as more the providers. And I think that society has, you know, assigned this role of a dad having to be sort of very desensitized to the family unit that's being fractured. And so being able to actually explore your feelings is also being able to say, I have to sit and really think about this. I have to sit with myself and feel these feelings, and have that vulnerability, which is work. It does take work, but it's definitely doable, and it's possible.
Yeah. So, and for all my fellow dads out there, you know, who were raised at least the way that I was. I mean, when we're talking about feelings, we're not talking about hungry or sleepy or gassy. I mean, those are legitimate feelings, but that's not what we're getting into. But it's tough. Like, you know, you're saying that you sit down, explore your feelings, and try to understand what you're going through. That's a tough thing to do for some reason. I don't know, but I think that's where the next one comes in, and the next one's really simple. And this is number 4: ask for help. Right now, again, it's related to the previous one about understanding your feelings, because, you know, men are known not even to ask for directions, right? So how do you have you? It sounds really simple, ask for help, but it's a really hard thing to actually do for a lot of them. So when you're working with men like this and fathers like this, how do you approach this with them? And do you feel that there are obstacles?
So when I say ask for help, I like to ask the dads that I'm working with. First, I like to ask them, do you have any family nearby? And that may actually seem like a very obvious question or an obvious solution, but I think a lot of men are actually very hesitant to get help from their relatives, because they sort of, there's a sense of shame. And I think, again, these sort of gender roles that we get assigned, I think the whole idea of a guy saying, I need help watching my child, or I need help doing anything in respect to my child. I also think that there's a pride aspect to it. Ask for help. You might have neighbors who may be from a divorced family. You might have fellow parents, at a PTA or in your school. There are a lot of folks that are out there that are there to be helpful in the community, and it can be sometimes an unlikely person as well. It can be a librarian at the school who is especially close with your child, who takes the time to talk to them and see how they're doing. It could even be a coworker of yours who recently went through a divorce themselves. There are so many. I think that's the other misnomer, right? Is I think that the common part of the human experience, when we're struggling or suffering, is that we feel like we're alone and that there isn't anyone there. And when you tap into your networks of friends and family and neighbors, you'd be really surprised to see how a lot of people really step up and try to be helpful. I can speak to my own experience. When I was with my dad on the weekends, he had a neighbor who actually she was a retired elementary school teacher. And I remember that when I first started going to my dad's house, it was just a very jarring experience, right? Because it was something that I wasn't used to. And I remember she lived on the same floor as we did. And she used to invite me and come, to make cookies, or she'd ask me if I needed help with my homework. And so neighbors can also be really fabulous. And I think we don't really know the community that we have. We don't know, people don't really know how helpful people can be and how much help is there, but you really have to put yourself in that vulnerable place and look outward. Again, not everybody has family close by, right? And because of COVID, we're so limited to who we can see and who we can talk to. And so I also want to put that into perspective as well. I understand that because of these circumstances, there's certain things that everyone is limited in doing in terms of meeting people and movement. But really, I'd like to quote one of my favorite people, Mr. Rogers. He was probably no. Really, he.
I agree with you. I totally like Mr. Rogers was just like a reservoir of wisdom.
A reservoir of wisdom. He was and is amazing in his whole approach with children. And it was interesting during COVID. I rewatched one of his speeches, and in one of his speeches, he said that when he was little and he would see in the newspaper war or things that were going badly, or he would see somebody getting hurt, or like a house fire and people running out of the house. His mother used to always say to him, "Look for the helpers." So the helpers were probably the firemen, et cetera. And so I'm going to quote Mr. Rogers, look for helpers, because there are helpers. And here's the other thing, is that I think a lot of people are really willing to help. You also have to you have to be able to say, I'd like help, or hey, to your neighbor, hey, I just moved into the neighborhood. My daughter Sally is 6 and your son Bob is 7. Would she like to come over? Would you guys like to spend time with us? I mean, there's so many different options, but right, the directions thing I think is a great example, Ali. And I think a lot of men don't like to ask for help, but know that there is community, and I think that community can also come in really unlikely places. And so again, the neighbor, the teacher, there are always folks that are willing to help and give that positive energy. And also there are people like me, right, who went through a divorce and who feel, especially empathetic to that. I don't have any neighbors right now who are children or who have parents that are divorced, but if I did, I certainly would want to be on that helping train.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about that. I want to stay on this for a little bit longer. So let's talk about counseling, okay, and help in terms of mental health support, right? So, and that's what you do. So, Together Family Wellness is also about that. It's about parent coaching, and it's about providing support to parents who are struggling with those kinds of things. So, counseling is one of those tough things where, so asking for directions is one thing. And I'm sorry, I'm totally stereotyping all men here. I think I have the right to be able to do that. But there's also, if something's broken in your house, I don't want to call the plumber. I can do this myself. It's like there's a very sort of DIY attitude. And when it comes to parenting, I think a lot of men, and I'd say probably everybody, not just men, but primarily men, are, they think, well, I can handle this, and if they can't handle it, and if things aren't working out, they feel like a failure. They feel really, really sort of dejected. Um, and I remember talking to a friend once, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't need to go to counseling. I don't have to take my kid to counseling. Why should I do that? Like, this is something, I'm the parent. I can deal with this stuff." And I was thinking, well, if you're thinking you want the absolute best thing for your child, like, you will stop at nothing to do the best thing for your child, and this counseling could potentially help. You can do them both. It's not like you're going to be in counseling 24/7. You can take your child to counseling. You can at least explore that and have it as another avenue, and then you can do all of your DIY stuff the rest of the time. So, is it hard? Like, do men come into counseling voluntarily, and when they do they? Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot here, but just as a pathologist, I noticed that sort of the older school men, they would, if they had a lesion on their leg, they would wait until it had grown like halfway through the leg into the bone before they showed up to get help, and it was usually their wives or somebody who brought them in saying that, okay, this guy's got cancer, it's already in his bones, and he didn't come and get it because he thought it was fine. Do you come across that kind of thing with men who come and ask for help? Do they wait until the last moment, and until you have like a really extreme kind of situation?
So absolutely, that's a very that's a great point, and very poignant. I have a lot of dads that come who are they just say, I'm at my wit's end. I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know what to do. I feel stuck. I feel trapped. Absolutely. And I think, again, sort of this idea of, if a man's going through a divorce, that he has to go through it alone, and he's bottling up all the feelings, and just sort of like the growth. What did you call it?
Well, it's a lesion. I mean, that's
Lesion.
I saw this specifically. I think the most jarring case, I've been using jarring a lot in this. Like, this guy had a squamous cell skin cancer that was on his, like, I think, inner thigh, and he just let it grow. I mean, those things you can just excise them and get rid, but he just let it grow like deeper and deeper into his leg until his wife said, "Okay, this is a problem. This is getting really gross. So why don't you go get it checked out?" You know.
Well,
Yeah.
so that's actually a great point. So part of the issue with dads coming and asking me for help is that, unlike in your field, where eventually, it gets really gross and the wife says something and the wife pushes him to go, there's no wife in this situation, or no partner in this situation that's pushing them to go into counseling, like they would push a partner to go into medical treatment, right?
Right.
So I think that's one of the I mean, I don't think having a lesion is advantageous, but one of the advantages should, is certainly is that you have a partner that is pushing you to put you in a better place, and so that's one of the biggest. I think that's one of the biggest issues that I've come across, is that I have dads that are at their wits' end. They feel almost paralyzed. Really, really, really paralyzed. And what I try to do when I work with dads in the very beginning is to really just simply say, hey, what are you feeling right now? Forget what your ex is saying to you. Forget what's going on with your child. What are you feeling right now in this moment? Because that's usually part of the root of it, is how can we get you how can I get a dad to feel like he's in a better place, so he feels more solid and more equipped to deal with the challenges that are coming. So what usually happens is I'll get a dad that'll say to me, oh, it's been 3 months and my ex and I are texting each other nonstop and screaming at each other over the phone. And so, to use, again, your example of the lesion, I really encourage people to come to me in the beginning, because I think that the more that we can work on early, the better the result, or the more favorable the result for everyone will be. And so I would say the majority of the dads that I work with are coming to me in crisis mode. So the lesion's there, the lesion's grown.
Yeah.
And again, I'm definitely equipped and empathetic and happy to be helpful. I just know that every dad that I've worked with has said to me, when we've stopped working together or have come back to me and asked, they say, I really wish that I had spoken to you sooner. I really wish that I'd had this conversation with you sooner.
Right.
And so it's, I would say just in general, to all folks out there, but especially to divorced dads, really, really get counseling, get support from the very, very beginning, because it will pile on and it will pile on and it will pile on, and it will stick to you like glue. And so I cannot stress enough how important it is for dads to get counseling, to get help, to get support from the very, very, very beginning, or else, I certainly don't want any dad to end up like the your skin patient. What was the cancer?
The skin patient. Yeah, it was squamous cell cancer. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want
I
to.
don't want any of that.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That's really well said. And that's a really good point. I think these kinds of things to actually get a lot of dads to go out and do these things is tough. And I try to think of myself as a little bit more open-minded, but even I've been kind of indoctrinated with this sense that, you have to do everything you're on. You should be able to handle it. You're a man. And if you don't, then you feel emasculated. So I think that these last two, number 3 and number 4, are super, super important, I think, for a lot of men to know. So let's move on. Number 5, you said, spend focused time with your children. Pick an activity and make it your own. So what do you mean by focused time?
So I think it's super, super important. And again, I don't want to make any stereotypes or generalizations, but I would say that typically children usually spend more time with their mothers, or live more with their mothers than they do their fathers in situations of divorce and separation, unless you're a single dad. And again, I've seen different arrangements, but what I would say is that is the typical arrangement that I see. And I think what a lot of dads tend to do when they spend time with their kids is that they'll sort of just be present. And when I say be present, they'll take them to a ball game, they'll take them to an amusement park. But I think that in order to bond and have that relationship, especially since you may not see your children as often as you'd like to, pick an activity and make it your own. It means pick something that you and the child like to do together that's just something that the two of you do, because it creates a bond. And it's something that you can take with you throughout your life. And so
and it's exclusive, right? It's exclusive. It's just something that, okay, this is what I do with my dad, and this is what I like doing. So it's, yeah. Go ahead.
So I was just wondering, do you have any activities that you like to do with your daughter?
Yeah. It's so what's really funny is, like, my daughter is singing in the car. So I sing, and I love singing, and she loves music. So what we do is we sing, and we even talk about things like, she knows her chest voice, she knows her head voice, she knows her mixed voice, she knows all of the different singing techniques, and we do all kinds of different songs. I have developed a liking for the Backstreet Boys, which I never thought would happen, right? Because she really likes them. So now I actually know a lot of their songs in a way that I didn't before. So yeah, I guess, things change, but yeah, that's one thing that we do that's pretty exclusive together. And she even tries to give me lessons. She now tries to teach me how to sing. But you're absolutely right. Like, it's the one thing that's totally our own. I mean, that's not something that she does with anybody else. And even she doesn't do it in the same way that we do it together.
Right. And so it creates that lasting bond, and right, it's that exclusivity. And that's one example. A dad that I worked with, he loved to go fly fishing. And so he would always take his daughter fly fishing with him. And they would do fly fishing trips over the weekend. And so I worked with him about 3 years ago. And so his daughter must be, I would say, around 10, 11 now. And they're still going fly fishing together. And that's their thing that they do. And also, it's, again, to have that exclusive activity, because unfortunately, there are a lot of situations where fathers are not seeing their children as much as they'd like to, in terms of like the visiting arrangement. And so they are still going strong with their fly fishing. And if he's watching right now, keep the fly fishing going.
Did you have anything like that with your parents specifically? Activities?
So I used to love to cook with my dad. That's something that we'd still like to do. And that was something that we got to do by ourselves. My mom's not crazy about cooking. And my dad loves it. And so it was super fun because, in the beginning, when I was really young, I was only allowed to, cut things with a plastic knife. And so, as time went on, my job as sous chef got a little bit more complicated and more demanding. So we went from cutting with the plastic knife to grinding things in the meat grinder. My dad has actually a manual meat grinder, so I got to use that when I was younger. And now we make full-blown meals together. I don't know. I mean, maybe we could go on Iron Chef or something like that, or the Big Bake Off. I don't know, but we really like cooking together. Oh gosh, I don't want to age myself, but I'm almost 31 years old and he's 71, and that's something that we've been doing for 25 years at this point. So it's something that we really love to do together, and it's exclusive to us. There are other activities that we like, but I would say that is the activity that is ingrained in my memory and is something that we still do now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. All right, so let's go on with number 6. Maintain routines. So we talked about this earlier in terms of, I was telling you with the pandemic, the schools have been opening and then closing and so on. But maintaining routines, I guess here we can talk more about daily routines, right? So anyway, I don't know why. You tell me, what do you mean by maintain routines?
So I think one of the very counterintuitive things that I see most parents do, and again, I think we're all parents are guilty of this, is that when a divorce happens, both parents usually feel terribly for the child. And so what ends up happening is that the parent will, say, oh, well, yeah, you can watch 2 extra TV shows. Oh, you don't have to go to bed at this time, because they feel like if they do that they're being nicer to the kid because the kid is going through something. And even though divorce is a very painful process, not sticking with routines and not sticking with rules of children actually is detrimental in terms of the child's mental health and in terms of the child's sort of conceptualization of what the new family is going to look like, right? Because dad lives in a different house, mom lives in a different house, and dad's letting me watch TV all the time, and it's probably because dad feels bad. But then when she goes to mom's house, mom has a no TV rule, on the weekdays and only TV on the weekends. And so when you're not maintaining the same routines, you can run into a lot of roadblocks with kids in terms of, being compliant. And again, I think I will stress this, and this really bears a lot of repeating. Children need to have routines. They're extremely important during a divorce, before a divorce, post-divorce. And so, I mean, I even remember, when my parents got divorced, and my dad, would say, "Oh, you can watch, another TV show," and then another TV show became 2 more TV shows, and then another 2 TV shows became 4 TV shows, etc. And so, I think that parents sometimes will, sort of spoil their kids a little extra during these times, because it's also a way to make themselves feel better. Like they feel bad about what's going on. So they're saying, well, if I let my kid have another TV show, if I let my kid have dessert every night, then I'm going to feel better. And so that is the most counterintuitive thing. And I would say, again, no situation is ideal, but maintaining routines and then maintaining the same routines in both households. So both exes, both parents agreeing on a common set of rules.
Right.
That's the biggest, yeah.
So I was going to say that's one of my least favorite expressions is easier said than done, because like, what is it easier said than? Everything's easier to say than to do. But this is kind of easier said than done in a way, right? Like, what if you have like some of us, we're fortunate enough to have good, friendly, amicable, cooperative relationships with our exes. Many people aren't, right? Many people are dealing with toxic exes, or people who are potentially abusive, but they have shared custody with them for whatever reason, and the parents will try to one up each other. So how do you handle that? How do you handle it if you're the person who really wants to maintain the same kind of routine both places, and your ex is just not having it and they're just trying to compete with you? What do you do?
So first of all, I would say you can't win. Number one, this is there's certain battles that you're just simply not going to win. And when I say that, I say it in the sense of you can control and react. You can control yourself and react, and that is a choice of yours. And the rules that are in your house are your choice. You cannot force your partner to enforce rules, and you can't force your partner, frankly, to do anything. But I think that in those situations, with dads that I've worked with, when mom has very different rules and very different understandings, what I like to tell dads to say is, these are the rules in my house. These are the rules in my house. You may have different rules in mom's house. These are rules in my house. And then how children will usually chime in. Well, mom said it was okay. And I think one of the obstacles that parents can run into is that they'll say, well, mom's wrong, or mom can say that, mom shouldn't do that. And what I really, really want to stress to parents in general, but really to divorced dads is, this is where you can get caught in that trap of speaking illy of your ex simply by saying, well, what your mom's doing is stupid, or what your mom's doing is no good. And so I'm very much into neutrality in the sense of there's no value judgment on what the ex is doing. You simply say, these are the rules in my house. And so you can't get your ex to agree. If you can't get your ex to agree on, shared rules in both households, that requires probably, more counseling, more work, in a therapeutic or, parent coaching setting. But what I would say is that, again, don't fall into that trap of telling your child, oh, well, that's not how I do it. That's not a good way to be. No, you just simply have to stick to your guns and say, these are the rules in my house. Mom has her rules. I have my rules. These are the rules in my house. And if the child says, well, mom lets me do it, or don't put a value judgment on it. Don't say what mom is doing is better, worse, nothing. Just stick to your rules. Stick to your rules and stick to what you have to do in your house. Because
the fear is
a losing game.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's a losing game. And again, sort of when you're not maintaining the same rules and expectations in the home, that's where things can get very sticky in terms of exes commenting on each other's rules, parenting styles, et cetera, et cetera. And then you just it's like a domino effect. And so, again, like for all the dads that are listening, if your child says, well, mom says that I can do this, or mom has better rules, all you have to say is, well, those aren't my rules. These are my rules. Mom has different rules. I have different rules. And by saying different, you're not putting a value judgment on it.
Yeah.
Your spouse may very well have rules that aren't so great. I've worked with dads where the mom, had a teenager and there was no curfew at all, that the child could come home whenever they wanted, and the dad had a curfew, right? And so I told him, you cannot force your ex to give your daughter a curfew, but what you can say is, these are the rules in my house. So if you're in my house, these are the rules. Not that mom's rules are wrong, mom's rules are right. There's no value judgment. You just have to be very solid with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. The obvious issue with that is that there are a lot of dads, and we talked about exploring your own feelings. A lot of dads who have a fear that I'm not going to be able to handle it. She's going to want to be with her mom all the time, or my kid's going to want to be with their mom all the time. And then they're trying to be nice, and they have trouble establishing those routines. And then when they find out that, okay, well, the mom's making life much easier for them, and my rules are a little stricter. What if I lose my child to the other parent? How do you counter that concern?
So, number one, children are very resilient. And so children at one moment may favor one parent over the other for various reasons.
I guess that's natural, right?
It can happen for a variety of reasons. And yes, sometimes it comes naturally based on certain factors. But children are resilient. And when I say that, I mean to say that, I have worked with dads that say, I'm stricter and they don't want to come to my place anymore. Because they like being with their mom better. Children have phases, and things ebb and flow. And so obviously every situation has its own context, and I would give, holistic advice and unique advice to each situation. What I would say to that is, parents or dads that have fears that their child won't want to spend more time with them because they're stricter or because their set of rules are different. You may encounter that obstacle in the beginning, but that's not it's not a life sentence. Kids,
Right.
and by the way, children, liking one parent, good cop, bad cop, that happens even in homes that are not divorced homes. So that is that's a phase that I think a lot of children go through for different reasons. And so what I would say also to dads is be patient. I think patience is one of the most necessary components of the process of divorce and separation. And so again, you may have mom having different rules, or the children may like spending time with mom better, but that's not a forever thing. And I think that a lot of dads can get scared about that. But just know that children's preferences and feelings, they can really ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's good to know. It's really insightful. Number 7. Here it comes. Don't rush into a new relationship. So, yeah, go ahead. I'll just let you start with it. I'm not going to editorialize this one at all.
Wow. So I'm not going to put this delicately, because I think it's really important that this is named and that this is brought to the table. But I think that a lot of dads and parents in general, but especially dads, I've noticed when they're separated or divorced, they really feel the need to have, another partner and to rush into another relationship, because I think there's a lot of feelings of feeling isolated and alone. I think rushing into a new relationship right after you've gotten divorced, or if you're in the process of separation, I think it does the father a disservice, and it also does the child a disservice, because also, when you're a dad and you're going all through all these things, you're in this place of terror, vulnerability, and guilt, and you really need to concentrate on your own feelings and really get a handle on what you're going through and what you need to do to keep yourself afloat and keep your child afloat. And so to give you the very child-oriented answer, it's really about the child and how the child is feeling, and keeping yourself in a state where you can identify the child's feelings, relate with the child. And frankly, on a very sort of pragmatic level, I don't think it's fair to rush into a relationship with a person when you're already handling so many big feelings as a parent with your child and with yourself. And so I think rushing into a new relationship can also be just very disruptive to the child, because the child already sees, their own parents' relationship being fractured, and rushing into another relationship is also very disruptive to a child. So I would say not rush into a new relationship. Absolutely not.
So this next one is related, number 8, where you said don't bring your kids into a new relationship unless it has staying power.
Yes, staying power. That is super important.
So I like that, because I get exactly what that means. But go for it.
So, in layman's terms, don't introduce your kids to somebody that you don't think that you don't think is going to stick around for that long. I think everybody is entitled to their own personal romantic lives, but I would say that if you're with somebody and you feel like that it's not a permanent situation, do not expose your child to that person, simply because it's not healthy for you, it's not healthy for the other individual involved, and it's not healthy for the child. Again, I think the overarching theme that I'd like to point out here is sort of the theme of transitions, because if you rush into another relationship, that's another transition that your child has to go through.
Right, yeah.
Or even if you're in a relationship that doesn't have staying power and you introduce this temporary person to your child, that's another transition. And so all of these questions and all of these comments about spend focused time with your children, maintain routines, don't rush into a new relationship, every every punch you throw at your ex lands on your child. This is all focused on transitions, because the fracturing of a relationship, a divorce or a separation of any kind, is a transition. It is a life transition. And it is a life transition. Unfortunately, divorce and separation, when there are children involved, that's a transition that children don't have a choice to participate in. They are participating in a transit in lots of transitions, of which they did not sign up for.
Right. And so there's, you said if you know that it does, unless you know that it has staying power. But a lot of times, I mean, you get into relationships in the beginning and you think, especially if you're on the rebound, right? If you're on the, and then because people do this all the time. And I know guys do this all the time. So, well, actually, this is not just a guy thing. So I'm not going to be sexist about this. But, you get into something new, you're hurting, you're vulnerable. And then you have what might be a sort of rescue operation. And you think, you're like, wow, this is it. This has tremendous staying power. It's going to stay. And then it doesn't. A lot of times it doesn't. So is there, and in that case, like, I think that it's good to wait a certain amount of time. Even if you do think that this is something that has a lot of potential long term, it's still good to probably wait a good amount of time. But what amount of time is that? Like 6 months, a year, and like before you introduce your kids to a new partner?
So I think, again, that really depends on a lot of things. Again,
Yeah.
everything is very contextual. If you happen to meet a new partner, a month after getting separated, I certainly wouldn't rush into that and introduce your child to that person. But I would say, in an ideal world, if I could wave a magic wand, and I've told a bunch of the dads I've worked with this, and then their eyes go bulge out, and they get really shocked. But in a perfect world, a year.
Mm-hmm.
A perfect world, I would say, if you want to introduce a new partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a partner, whoever that might be, wait a year.
Yeah.
Be with that person a year. I have a lot of dads saying, well, what about 6 months? What about 8 months? Here's the thing also, a year isn't actually that much time, especially to a child.
Right.
Time flies. I mean, I'm an adult and time seems to be flying, right? But for children,
It flies faster the older you get. Yeah, it's just like, where's everything going? Yeah.
So that's what I would say, is that I have a lot of the dads that I work with, when they meet a new partner, they really, they don't like the 1 year timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And again, what I try to say to them is, you might think 1 year is a long time, but 1 year to a kid is like, 2 days. I mean, I can tell you that I remember, going into 4th grade and meeting all my classmates, and I'm blinking now and I'm 31. So time really flies quite quickly. And so a year to a dad might seem like a lot of time, but for a kid, that's nothing. And so if I could wave a magic wand, I would say to all the dads out there, you meet a nice guy, you meet a nice girl, you meet a wonderful partner, which I certainly, I wish that on everyone. If they, if a relationship doesn't work out, I certainly hope that everyone gets to find love again and find someone else. Oh, that's the other thing I'd like to say. And I don't know if this is in our list, but you can find love again. I think a lot of divorced dads that I work with think that they won't find anybody because of their circumstances, or just because they feel so broken. And I do want to say that for all the divorced dads out there, or separated dads, you will find someone again. I don't have a crystal ball, but what I can say is, more often than not, people do find lovely people and wonderful people, even after a fracture in a previous relationship. So I tell dads, you will find someone, and please, if you do, wait a year. A year,
Yeah.
a child is nothing.
Yeah, I actually think the reason I said 6 months, a year, is because I think a year is quite reasonable, because kids get attached. I mean, I see this with my daughter. I mean, like, they get attached really easily, and especially because they're also vulnerable, right? They've just been they've gone through they've gone through the separation in a way. They're having to do things that other kids don't do. They may have to go from one house to the other and back, and like a couple of times a week or every week. And depending on the arrangement, it's a difficult thing to go through. So when you're in that state of vulnerability, you meet somebody else, and you can, these kids, they do get attached. They form relationships with them, and then if they do that, and then 5 months down the line, that person is gone too, that's another separation.
Absolutely.
Right.
And actually, you gave, an extremely child-focused answer, which is, my primary way of looking at things is how does the child, from the viewpoint of the child, but also, that individual. You may meet a partner, or you may meet someone that you think is the right person for you, and they might get attached to your child, not just your child getting attached
That's
to
right.
them, but they might get attached to your child. So that's another, fractured relationship for the child, for you, and for that other person. And so absolutely, 1 year, gentlemen, dads, 1 year, do it. You can do it, just 1 year.
Stick it out for 1 year.
Yeah, stick
Okay,
it
I
out.
like it. I'm good with that. So, all right. So next one. So yeah, we're at number 9 now. So you said be civil with your ex at all times around your children, even if you aren't otherwise. And yet, so yeah, there was a comment about this that I saw on one of the Facebook threads I had. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the commenter, but it was a really good comment. They're saying, like, if you have, for example, a birthday party where you decide, okay, we both want to be there together for our child's birthday, then don't argue, be civil, be very friendly, because it's better to celebrate the birthday separately with the child rather than come together, attempt to do it together and fail miserably and ruin it for the child.
Absolutely.
Right.
So here's the deal. Plain and simple. If y'all can't just be in a room together and be silent, and sing happy birthday and take pictures and eat cupcakes and blow out candles, then there shouldn't be a joint event. I would say that that would be a great topic actually for our next chat, sort of events and what that looks like. Gathering as a family when the family structure has become very different, right? So let's say mom has a new partner and dad has a new partner, et cetera. But again, I cannot stress enough, if you can't be civil, meaning literally just sit in a room, where there's, merriment happening, then those sort of milestones like birthdays need to be celebrated separately. I think ideally parents can come together for those milestone events, graduations, birthdays, etc. But that's also part of knowing yourself, right? So if you cannot be civil with your ex, know yourself and say, hey, it's not a great idea for me to go to this birthday party, or vice versa. Right. And I think that's the other thing, right? Is you may want to be there for your child with your former partner, but if you and your former partner really can't get along or can't be civil in a room, that just ruins it for everybody. That ruins the event for the person. And so actually, in a way, even if you're not able to get along with your ex, that takes maturity to say, hey, I'm not at a point, or they're not at a point where we can be together in the same room for things. And so ideally, I like to say this to all the families that I work with, ideally for milestones, everyone should be present to celebrate those things. But if you're not able to be present, accept that and don't be present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that completely. So finally, number 10, keep your children connected to extended family, paternal. And this totally resonated with me too, because I have an only child. You were an only child, right? Yes. Mine is 4. And it's been tougher during the pandemic, but I'm fortunate to have, my brother lives close to me. He's got 3 kids. My child is very close to them. And, just the fact that they can be together, that actually gives them a sense of family, a sense that, there's something there that's connected, that there is support, that they're very loved by people in their family. Like if you ask my daughter, her family, like, who's your family, she'll mention, her mom and her dad, but then she'll also mention, her uncles and her aunts and her cousins. And it's this could be, I think, it's also sort of a cultural thing as well. I mean, I'm South Asian, so we tend to have really huge extended families. They can be really, really annoying, obviously, but in this kind of situation, it can be very helpful, extremely helpful, lifesaver almost.
Absolutely. So again, every situation is different, and so I'm really speaking sort of from my general observations from what I've seen. Again, I think dads are very underrepresented and forgotten in the whole divorce process, and I think that because of that, sometimes I think the extended family of the father, the paternal side, can sort of get pushed to the side because of all of sort of the chaos that's already happening because of the fracture in the family structure. And so this is another part of the asking for help, right? Because, you know, you may have, I know you said you're South Asian, so culturally you guys are super family oriented. But, you know, even so, that ties back into the asking for help. So, you know, I worked with a dad, for example. He lived in Boston and he had his mom, I think, was in Florida, and he had a brother in Arizona. And I said to him, I said, well, what about them? Why don't you guys get together with the kids and do something? And he said, she lives in Florida and he lives in Arizona. I said, so what? Fly there, or they can fly there. And he said, I don't want to ask them. I don't want to bother them. And I said, I bet you if you do, they'd be really inclined. And so that particular dad that I worked with called his mom and said, hey, you know, I want to do something with the kids because of the recent divorce. I want us to all get together. And she ended up coming up from Florida and staying for 6 months just to sort of help the kids out and help out around the house. And then the uncle from Arizona, he ended up coming once a month with his kids to see this dad that I worked with his children. And so I think that sort of ties into the asking for help, because sometimes I think when we think of extended family also, it can be a cousin too. Extended family doesn't just have to be a sibling. You can have a cousin, you can have an in-law, but that's all part of the asking for help, which a lot of dads don't really like to do. And so just the idea of calling your family, calling your brother, calling your sister, saying, let's all get together. It's been a rough year. This divorce has been rough. Let's do something. Even that is still in the category of asking for help. And so, yeah.
No, Elena, like you're so right about this. It's true. Like people want to help, especially extended family. And like I notice this personally too, because I think what happens is after you're divorced and you have especially if you have a child, you know, you may feel like you're a failure. You may feel like a little humiliated, a little embarrassed. You might want to like cut off from everything, and you know, you sort of silo yourself with your child. And I you know, like I've seen like my sister, my siblings, they call me. They're like, you know, why don't you guys? This is a pandemic, so it's been a little bit difficult. Like they say, you know, why don't you drop her off here for a few weeks? I mean, all the kids want to say they want to be there, and I thought about it. Like, you know, when I put myself in the same situation, if one of my siblings was going through the same thing, and when my nephews and nieces was in the situation that my daughter's in, then I would want that. I would also want to help them, because in a family, like all the kids are somebody that you feel for. And and the funny thing is, like they don't. I always think of, you know, you think about yourself, and it's not like your siblings really care about you, but they do care about your kids. So,
I mean,
I'm saying that as a joke, but
of course, no, absolutely. And again, I think it all just ties into the asking for help and really being able to sort of bulldoze that barrier a little bit.
Yeah.
And I really liked what you just said. I think a lot of people really do want to help. And I think that that's the other sort of counterintuitive thing that I've seen with dads who are in these situations of, you know, getting divorced or being single parents, is that I think a lot of dads think that they're being an imposition, or that nobody wants to be helpful. And it really, people want to help, and people want to be asked for help. And, you know, I'm a social worker, so it is a helping profession. But like I said to you, just the example with my dad's neighbor, there's so many people that want to help, and you really just have to get out there and ask for it. And again, just like you said, extended family, you know, your sister is reaching out, wants to, you know, be with your child and spend more time with her. And I think, again, there's just so much, I think that a lot of dads don't realize that there are a lot of resources that they have within their family unit. And when I say extended family, that could also be, you know, like a best friend that you have, that you've grown up with. And so I say extended family also, I mean, I'm referring to your, you know, blood relatives, but also, again, you know, neighbors, colleagues, all of those people. There's so much untapped help out there. And I think it's just, people are just so afraid to ask for it. Even just somebody that says, hey, I cooked a meal and I brought it over, just those little things. People are really, there's a lot of good in this world, Ali. There's a lot of good in this world. And I think through the whole process of my parents' divorce, I can definitely tell you that that was one thing I realize now, in hindsight. I think as a child, I wasn't making these very deep insights about things. But when I really look back, there were, like Mr. Rogers said, I had so many helpers, so many helpers.
Yeah. No, that's true. So we do have a bonus, and this is kind of connected with, we talked about support networks and everything. So we have a number 11. Okay. And that's connect with other divorced dads.
Yes.
So I gotta say, this isn't something I've done a whole lot, but recently, and this is, I'm talking about last week. So my daughter was at a playground. They recently opened up the playgrounds here, and she met a kid there, and the other kid asked her about her parents, and she was saying something like, okay, yeah, my parents, they live in my house. And my daughter said, well, my parents, they're not married anymore, so they live in different houses, so they don't live together anymore. And there was a really sort of strange reaction from the other kid she was talking to, and that I would assume that that's fairly common. But I realized that my child doesn't really know anybody else, any other child who has the same kind of situation she does, who is, say, an only child with parents living in separate homes. And then she would talk to me about it, and a lot of times that's heartbreaking. And that's the first time I thought about it. I'm like, well, maybe I should find, is there a community, or because people have support groups, but is there a community somewhere, maybe online or wherever, where I could meet other people like that, and my daughter could potentially meet other kids who are in the same kind of situation, so she doesn't feel like it's not normal, right? Because this is a very common thing. What's the divorce rate? It's like half of marriages end up in divorce, right?
I have more friends whose parents are divorced than whose parents are together, and absolutely, I think, and that circles back to the asking for help thing. And I think that the shame and the stigma. But there's so many divorced dads out there. There's so many folks who share a common experience, who can learn from each other. And I think that's super important to connect with other divorced dads, because I mean, for lack of a better way of expressing it, there's so many of them. There's so many divorced dads out there. And, there are places, and there are places and there are circles, where you can find these communities and these, these kinships and this common experience. It's definitely out there for sure.
Mm-hmm. So that's it. I mean, that's pretty much the list that you had. Okay, that's really, really helpful. I hope everybody's watching this watching this here right now on YouTube, or if you're listening to it on your podcast app. I hope this has been helpful. We do have some questions from people here, so I'm going to go with Tariq Alhad first. So he's asking sort of a specific question. So the work I do is the people in in secular communities who've left their religion. So he's talking about religious differences between people. So I think he had several things, but I'll just so he's talking about, how do you handle this with children if you have religious differences? I think he's in a situation where his partner was a conservative Muslim, and he's not. He's secular. So how do you handle this with children when you know that your ex-spouse portrays you very negatively, like a sinner and an evil person? This isn't just like, okay, they've got different routines, but that your dad is an evil man because he's a disbeliever, or because you don't follow the religious dogmas. I know this is a little out of the way, so let me know what your thoughts are just in general.
So, first of all, Tariq, I'm very sad to hear about that situation. I just wanted to name that and say that must be extremely difficult to get those labels, and it must be extremely hurtful. So I just I wanted to empathize with that. How do you handle this with children who know that your ex-spouse portrays you very negatively? Well, you be yourself. Have those activities that you do with your children. Have the fishing, have the cooking. Kids also see by example. I think spending time saying to your kids, oh well, if your mom says that I'm a sinner, your mom says that I'm an evil person, that's not true. I don't think addressing those things head on is really productive for anyone, right? Because they're already getting that feedback from a parent. And so what you can do as a parent is to have those activities and be the best person that you can be. And what I mean by that is I'm sure you're not just Tariq the sinner or Tariq the evil person. You may be Tariq the great fisherman, Tariq the cook, Tariq the artist. And those are things that, instead of sort of focusing or trying to confront those issues, because religion and, it's a very complicated, nuanced topic for a lot of people. And so even, the idea of sitting with a child and saying to them, well, I'm not a sinner. I don't really think that children fully conceptualize what all of those things are. And so again, children are sponges. And so they may get some of their sponge might come from what your ex is saying, but you can lead by example, and you can be the best dad that you can be. You can do all those fun things, bond with your child, and let your child see how you are and how you behave towards them. Because children really do. Children may hear things. I mean, I definitely. It's very common, again, for ex-spouses to badmouth each other. But again, Tariq, do things with your children, and form those memories with them, because they will have those good memories in addition to whatever your ex is saying. And so you are only in control of the narrative that you can give them when you are with them. And so control the narrative when you're with them. And the narrative that when you're with them is that you're loving, you're fun, you want to spend time with them, you want to find activities. And again, that's why I really, really want to circle back with what Ali just said with the activities that he does with his daughter. I think the activities can be extremely helpful. And, that bonding and that love, whether it's through fishing, whether it's through cooking, that bond will transcend a lot of the negativity, because your child may be hearing things, but they're also doing things with you. And
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was saying that we're a little over an hour. Are you okay to stick around for another 10 minutes?
Yeah, no problem. I think we have another question from Christina Rona.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, no, I'll get to that. I wanted to say one more thing to Tariq. Like, the when people portray you as evil, and the worse they portray you, somehow that ends up it plays to your advantage. So I know that happens. The kind of work that we do in Tariq, is that when people try to say that you're really evil, and then others meet you in person and they realize this person isn't evil at all. Like, as Lena was saying, that they're caring, that they're fun, that that they're not malicious. That ends up exposing more about the person who is accusing you of being that way than it does. It says a lot more about them than it does about you. And kids generally are pretty smart about it. If two things don't work together, they don't have, like, adults, I think, have more tolerance for cognitive dissonance. Kids don't really. I mean, things do have to jive and they have to fit together. If they don't fit together, then the credibility of the person who's accusing you of being a certain way, if it doesn't match with the real picture, that credibility is a lot more shot than your consistency. And this is, again, I think, Lena, to your previous point about patience, there's have to be patience. You got to write it out. And eventually, in my experience too, with this kind of situation in other contexts, eventually it does work out. So,
yeah, I second that, and I second the patience, Tariq. I wish you fortitude, and in that fortitude, I wish you a lot of patience. Patience in general will serve people well throughout their lives. But I would say one of the number one things I say to dads is patience. So I wish you fortitude, and I wish you patience. And I hope you continue to do fun things with your children and spend time with them. Yeah.
Christina Rorman is saying, as an adult now, what do you wish you could have told yourself as a young child during the divorce process?
Oh, wow. That's a big one. I think the first thing I would have said to myself as a child is, you're going to be okay. You are going to be okay. There are other girls just like you, meaning there are other children that have, parents that are divorced. That's a huge one. There are other girls like you. I think that's, again, going back to the whole divorced dad thing about how, we think that we're the only ones. I think the human condition is always about this sense of, feeling alone and feeling like no one else can relate to what you're feeling. And I think the biggest thing that I wish I had really realized and conceptualized as a child was that there are many girls out there like me. There are many Elenas out there who, have a mom and a dad that live in a different house, and that that's okay, and that you're not the only one. And so, I would say that to children, and I say that to the dads I work with. You're not the only one. Things will be okay. And I think, children need to feel the love from both parents, even if both parents are flawed. And so I think even though I think every parent wishes that they could have done things differently. There's no perfect parent. There's no manual, right? It's not like a driver's license. There's no criteria. But I would also say to myself as a child, your parents aren't perfect. Your parents love you and they're doing the best that they can. And so even though sometimes as a child, it may not feel that way, because also, right, as a child, you view your parents and you view adults as these perfect people, as these sort of giants that, can do no wrong. And then, as the older you get, you realize, oh my gosh, my parents, they're people too. They're people too with their own narratives and their own traumas and, their own crosses to bear. So, I would say thank you for asking that, Christina. I would say that's my final point for that question, is that your parents love you. Your parents love you very much. Yeah.
Can I ask a flip side to Christina's question? Is that what would you tell as a child growing up, from a child's point of view? But what would you tell your parents today? That what would you tell your parents about? What's something that they did good, that was helpful, and what was something that they did that they could have done differently? Is that another big one?
That's a big one. Yeah. Let me think. That's a very, so I think one of the things that I'm really happy that my parents did was that they put me into therapy. And I think that most kids can benefit from some sort of parent coaching or therapy, just to sort of have another party, like another social worker or a therapist, as a sounding board that can sort of help the child identify those feelings. Because I think as a child, when you're experiencing all these things, it's very hard to name all of those feelings, right? So if you ask a child, well, how do you feel about mom and dad not living together? I'm sad. Okay, well, what does sad mean? What are the things that make you sad? And so that was, I think, one of the best things that my parents did for me. What do I think could have been different? I think my parents were both suffering, with their own traumas and their own, sadness from the separation. And I think sometimes I could feel their suffering and see their suffering, even though they didn't necessarily tell me, oh, I'm upset or I feel bad. I think it's very easy for children to see, a mood and affect. And so, sometimes I wish that I wasn't a witness, or that I didn't, that I couldn't see my parents, sadness, which was sometimes very apparent, right? You don't have to say that you're sad. You don't have to, but I think it's really important as a parent, no matter how sad you feel, no matter how defeated you are or crushed or guilty, all of those things, to really try your best to keep your affect and your mood even, and to keep and to, process those feelings, with a social worker, with a parent coach, with another person. And so, and again, children see things. So even if you're not trashing your ex, even if you're not openly saying things, if you look sad, if you look mopey, your kids can see that. And again, we're not perfect people. I'm not saying that you have to put on a smile for your kids when you're going, through a horrible divorce. But I would say, as much as possible, try your best to, shield your child from the emotions that you're going through. And try your best to, to stay even, and to not, to keep that part private, which I know can be very hard. And I know that may sound counterintuitive to say, well, I want you to bottle up your emotions in front of your child. I don't see it as bottling up emotions. I really see it as processing feelings by yourself or with another adult, because children can see your sadness. Children can see your pain. And the more that you show it, the more that they feel it. And so I really
Yeah.
want to make that as a disclaimer. My
I
parents,
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
no,
Finish what you're saying.
no, yeah, that's the disclaimers. I don't think my parents, went out to, be upset or look sad, but you can see it and you can feel it. And so, and sometimes, you'll feel sad and you'll think you're the only one in the room, but your kids, peeking at you from the doorway, and they see you sad or they see you tearing up. And so I really implore all parents, dads, moms, partners, etc., really try your best not to talk about feeling sad, not to look super sad, to really try to at least be even and neutral with your child, because your children can see how you're feeling. Your children can see your emotions, and it wears on them.
Yeah, I think it's not just that they actually mirror them. I mean, this is one I've seen. Again, I have a sample size of one, so it's totally anecdotal. But they'll mirror them. If you appear stable and you feel like, okay, I've got this, your routine's going to be all right, everything's going to be okay. They feel like everything's going to be okay. If you feel ambivalent, if you feel sort of unsettled or unstable, um, they will mirror that. They're going to feel the same way, and it's tough. On the one hand, you're saying, well, it's one thing to explore your own feelings and understand what you're going through, and acknowledge your child's feelings, right, and give them names like, are you feeling sad, are you feeling frustrated, and acknowledge what they're going through. But to I think you're right. You do have to be a little bit neutral. You have to be compassionate, right? I mean, you don't want to be neutral to the extent where you feel like you're an automaton or something, but you want to be compassionate, but you want to show that you have it together, you're there for
Absolutely.
them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, sort of to drive that point home again, when I was describing my parents and describing sort of, that how can that can get very problematic. I have said this to parents before, and they've said, well, this is how I'm feeling. These are my emotions. I'm a human being too. Well, you're an adult. You're an adult, and children are children. And children have temper tantrums, right? Because they're children. They're not expected to hold the same emotional space as an adult is. And so sometimes I do tell parents, if you feel sad, perform that you're not sad. Be solid. Fake it till you make it, at least with your children.
Mhm.
Because like you said, again, even if you're not in a good place, if you show that you're not in a good place, at least in front of your child can feel like you're not in a good place and mirror that behavior. And so, like I said, I do get dads telling me, well, I'm a human being too. I can get upset. I can cry. I say, yes, you are a human being, but you're not a child. You're an adult. So children are processing their own emotions, their own grief that they have difficult naming. Don't give them your emotions also to process. And so that's, again, plenty more to discuss next time. But again, understanding that, you're an adult and a child is a child. And that
Yeah.
emotional space that a child is holding and the emotional space an adult is holding is not the same.
Right. I wanted to, and we're going to wrap this up now. And after that, I do want to talk about we're going to talk about Together Family Wellness, which is your project, and let people know how they can get in touch with you. But I did get a comment from Heather Geyer. I mean, this is a Facebook friend of mine, and she wrote this quote, which I just thought it was very moving, and I think was great for me to hear. So I think for other single dads and divorced dads, I hope this resonates. So she said this quote: "If you are a single dad, your best is good enough. Tell your kids that you're doing your best and believe in yourself and your offspring. Between you and your kids' efforts, anything can be accomplished." And that's true. Like if you're a single dad, your best is good enough. You're not gonna. There's this tendency, and the reason that this resonates because there's this tendency to want to be perfect, and if you screw up anything, or if you have a lot of meetings one day and you can't you can't do that focused activity on your kid, or if they're with your kid, or you leave them on the iPad for way too long one day because you're just busy. You can feel at the end of the day, well, here I am, I'm doing this thing solo and I'm screwing up. But you can tell your kids, I'm trying my best. This is the best I can do, and sometimes it's not perfect. You can acknowledge that. You don't like. It's one thing to sort of shielding your feelings, like that's legitimate in its own way. But I think it's okay to tell your kids that, you're going to do the best that you possibly can. It's not always going to be perfect.
Absolutely, Ali. And that's sort of going back to my point again is, that our parents, I think as children, we see our parents as perfect people, and they're not. They're human beings, just like you and I are. They're not perfect people. And just to go back to the point, because I thought of a way that I really wanted to express this differently. Don't wear your emotions on your sleeve with your children as much as you would with your peers. When I was talking about shielding your children and how children, have their own feelings to process, that's what I would say again is obviously, no one's perfect, but try your best not to have your emotions on your sleeve when your kids are around, because again, like you said, they mirror that. But yes, and I guess that's another thing that you just said to me, which is really poignant to me, right? As you said, I'm trying my best. I'm not perfect. And I think that's another thing that I think I would have told myself as a little girl. Your parents are trying their best. They're doing the best that they can. And so, for you and all the other dads out there, we're all trying our best, especially during COVID. Oh my goodness. I mean, this is, everybody's trying their best times 1,000, 1,000,000. So, yeah, don't know that you're trying your best and that your best is valuable and it's real and it's authentic.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to wrap this up. I could go on. We could go on about this for a long time. I have so many other things to ask you, but we'll probably save that for another time. I'm going to have you back at some point. But yeah, so you have your I guess your support service that you provide to people is called Together Family Wellness. Okay, I'll just put up the URLs here. So, that didn't really copy the way I wanted it to, but I should. So yeah, so your website is togetherfamilywellness.com. On Instagram, you're at Together Family Wellness. I'll type this in again. Tell me a little bit about this briefly. Why did you start Together Family Wellness, and what is it about, and what do you do?
Okay, so Together Family Wellness is a parent coaching service. I work with mothers, I work with fathers, but I primarily work with divorced dads and single dads who are trying to navigate the complex process of divorce and dealing with it. I founded Together Family Wellness because I'm a social worker, and I've already worked with children and families for over 10 years. And I wanted to create a space where I could work with a population that is so underserved. And Together Family Wellness is also a place where parents can really just sort of find solutions and find doable, simple solutions. Because I think there are a lot of tips and tricks to making life easier as a parent that I wish that someone had given me. And so Together Family Wellness is really a space for all parents to come and to consult with me about challenges that they're facing as a family. I've worked with families, for example, who are sheltering in place and they have children that are not getting along, and what are some ways that we can do that. And so I'm here in the capacity of coaching parents and helping parents navigate difficult situations, divorce being one of them. And so, yeah, I'm a licensed social worker, and I'm just super excited to use my own personal experience and my experience of working with children and families as a way to work with parents that are facing challenges. And I'm really all about how can we make life easier. And I'm very much about strength-based solutions, finding strengths within the family system to, make life a little more easier and more seamless. So you can contact me if you're a divorced dad. You can contact me if you're a mother in a non-divorce situation and you have kids that aren't getting along. I accept all sorts of families, and I'm here to listen and I'm here to be helpful. And I've got some experience and some tricks up my sleeve of, making life a little more seamless again for families. So I'm here to help. And yeah.
I should say something. I don't know if this is going to embarrass you or not, but Elena is also a polyglot. So she has She knows multiple languages, and some of these. This is kind of weird because she knows you're obviously fluent in English. You're fluent in you speak Spanish as well, but you also speak Arabic, and you have nothing. You're not. You have. You're not Arab. You didn't grow up in any Arabic country, but you studied it, and you can read and write it and speak it, and you
Yes,
can communicate in it.
yes, I can.
You watch like Arabic YouTube videos with recipes and everything like that. It's yeah. So I won't get into the few Hindi words that you know from Bollywood movies.
Oh my goodness. No, yes, but I do know a couple, but yes, I do speak Arabic, and I do speak Spanish, and I do speak English, and I think I manage all three pretty well. I'll do in a pinch.
Yeah, yeah. No, okay, so that's great. So togetherfamilywellness.com is a website. The Instagram handle is at Together Family Wellness. Lena's also on Facebook. You're anywhere else where people can find you?
Feel free to message me on Facebook. You can go to my website, togetherfamilywellness.com. You can email me there. And you can follow me on my professional account at Together Family Wellness on Instagram. I will do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible. I love working with families. I'm always up to have a quick consultation to see if I can help you. I'm here and I'm ready to help.
Thank you, Lena. This was amazing. This is really, really eye-opening for me. So I really hope it helped everybody else who's listening or who is going to listen to this too, as much as it did me. So super, super appreciated. And I got to have you back at some point.
Thanks for having me, Ali.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Again, this is available if you're watching this on YouTube, and if you'd rather listen to it, you can go to iTunes, you can go to Spotify, you can go to whatever podcast app you use, and you can listen to it there. And thank you very much. We're going to see you next time. Bye.
Bye.